like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In front of you, you have a revised agenda. The clerk can remind me what was changed. I know for sure the motion to convene into closed session. Was that the only thing? Okay, very good. And of course, mine also notes that Treasurer Bennett is also in the audience this evening. So on council tonight, we have Mayor Morrow, myself, council members Gearboss, CO, McClellan, Mitchell, Tahar, and Dillon. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Police Chief Rennick, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Skull, Treasurer Bennett, as well as Legal Counsel Smith. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended unless there are additional changes.
So moved.
Moved as amended by Councilwoman Dillon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by
Mitchell.
Councilwoman Mitchell. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we will pass that motion by and proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? Please.
Little nervous on the mic, sorry. Mark Hensel, 492 Rosemont in Saline, local business owner, and I just wanted to comment in support of the non-discrimination ordinance that I believe is on the agenda later. Mayor Morrow, thank you for having brought that up in the state of the city and in the following coffee hour at the senior center a number of weeks back. A handful of us, well, I think a lot of us, were disappointed to see the failure of the civil rights motion moving through the school board in 2010, seeking to include LGBTQ rights. And I would just hope that if we can make note in the agenda, or make note of trying to include in the ordinance, not just what the Civil Rights Commission, former Civil Rights Commission language had in there, but to include gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your comments. Are there additional comments on agenda items? Yes, please.
The portion that comes up called discussion, do you get to speak then?
Nope, you can speak. If you'd like to comment on an item that appears on the discussion portion of the agenda, we would welcome your comments now.
Okay. Well, how's that for wheeling in just in time to make a comment? Okay. I see, I don't know the width and breadth. My name's Alan Scott. The where do I live part, is that? I live way out in Waterford, Michigan. Okay, but I love Saline. A few of you have seen me here before. I'm with Rand Construction. We have built several buildings in this community. Well, several. Liebherr, Petrolube, Condat, Tractor Supply, Mectron, PSMI, Allegra, Crosette, which became Flatbread, Briarwood Ford, McNaughton & Gunn, and on and on. So I do watch your meeting minutes for planning agendas and what have you, and learn that you may be looking at outsourcing for your construction services, relative to people like Gary Rubel. I know what Jeff Fordyce is kind of a different department, but Jeff and Tillman Taylor, he's retired from your department, wonderful staff. And I just want to rip off a few communities here that we work in, and then I'm going to say what I'm here to say. Rand, we work in Canton, Brighton, Chelsea, Dexter, Fenton, Howell, Lansing, Livonia, Oak Park, Rochester, someone's texting me, Southfield, Troy, Warren, Van Buren Township, Lyon Township, Delta, Green Oak, Pittsfield, Scioto, Plymouth, Waterford, White Lake, all over the place. This community has been the most friendly, the most helpful. Gary Rubel has been the best person for me to work with in every one of those communities, and if any of you are from the other ones, sorry to say it, the best. So when I caught wind of the fact that it may be a department that becomes outsourced like so many other communities have been, I wrote down 2 words, impersonal and impossible. I vote you keep Gary Rubel and his department in your community. Alan Scott, Rain Construction, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate your comments. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? No, then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to approve as submitted. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Seal.
Yes, but I'd like to remove the bills for brief discussion.
Okay, so bills will be moved, and they will be the first item under new business. So Seal will then move as amended. Or
Yes.
you'll second as amended?
Yes.
Mr. Tahar, you're obviously still comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so bills have been removed. It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come to bills. C, bills. This will be a motion to approve the payment of bills consisting of 53 payees in the amount of $101,147.81.
Move to approve.
Moved by CO to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Mr. CO, did you have a question or comment, sir?
I do.
The floor is yours.
For a year, I've been puzzling over the construct of the bills, the way we get them. Now, I understand why they're separated when it comes to a separate entity like the rec center or so on, because I assume there's a separate accounting being done. But why, pray tell, are the other regular city bills divided into sections like they appeared to be and subtotaled?
Actually, that's a perfect question for our treasurer.
Do you want to repeat that, Mr. CO? I apologize, but the city treasurer stepped out. Now she...
I do.
Mrs. Bennett, would you mind staying there at the dais, or at the podium, rather? Mr. CO has a question, and I believe you'll be able to address it.
For 1 year, I've been looking at the bills and puzzling over why they're subtotaled the way they are through the bill listing. And I understand when there's a separate budget entity, but it appears, like on pages 1 and 2 of the current billing. I guess I just don't understand the breakout. Could you please explain?
Okay, absolutely. So the bills that are listed on the top are usually bills that we typically pay in between, which is considered every Wednesday. We pay any bills that are due and payable, that electric bills, utility bills, payroll bills, bills that have to be paid for the operations that don't necessarily, we have to pay them. The city council can't deny those. So those are normally the ones that are paid up there, or in the event, sometimes we get a bill that shows up in accounts payable and it's due last week, and we do not want to incur any fees. That very rarely happens, but in the events of people being out or illnesses or something like that, that does happen, so we pay them in between. That's what's listed at the top. And then the ones at the bottom are the ones that we are holding in that box for your approval. So that's why. Now, the third one here, this was just one that it's actually a payroll bill that was paid after the regular bills were paid. And so by payroll bills, I mean it's employee deductions that, again, they're coming out of their check, they're going to be paid. This council doesn't have any authority to deny that, because it's a bill between the employee and whoever they're paying. And that one, I'm not exactly sure why that was listed on here even, but that's why they're broke out the way they are.
Thank you.
Sufficient for you, Councilmember Seal?
Yes, sir.
All right, excellent. Any additional comments or questions regarding the bills? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Tahar, to approve the bills. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business, item 17-28, City Hall copy machine replacement. This will be a series of 3 motions. The first motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 1st, 2017 memo from Technology Support Coordinator Shonk, and to approve or not to approve the Sharp MX 6070N copier lease at a monthly rate of $214 to replace the City Hall mailroom copy machine.
Can we make this simple and just move all three at the same time? I'll move to acknowledge receipt and approve them. There, can't?
Yeah, we can. I just separated them.
Okay.
They might be issues.
I'd second that.
So, just so I'm clear, Mr. Gearvall, you'd like to acknowledge receipt and then to approve all three?
Correct.
Okay. You're good with seconding that?
I am.
Everyone's clear on what the motion is then, okay? So this motion, if it were to pass, will essentially nullify the need to vote on B and C. Mr. Schonk, would you care to make any comment?
I can be lucky.
And actually, since we're considering all three in one motion, if you want to comment on the entire package,
Sure.
that would be, that'd be
Knock it out.
appropriate. Welcome.
Yeah, so in front of you right now is the memo kind of explained a breakdown of replacing the 3 copiers at City Hall. So the main kind of workhorse of the group is the City Hall main copy room. And then additionally, it'll be our front office machine and then the building department copier as well. All 3 of them are end of life. They're in major repair needs. Konica is discontinued support on 2 of them, and they've told us they're going to discontinue on the 3rd. So it's pretty much, we've squeezed as much life as we can out of them, and they need to be replaced.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Are there questions for our technology support coordinator? No. Very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no subsequent discussion, we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt and then to approve in one motion A, B, and C. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 14-134. This is wastewater treatment plant improvements, Phase 2, pay estimate number 13. This is a series of 2 motions. The first will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 10th, 2017 memo from Tetra Tech and to approve or not to approve change order number 2.
Move to acknowledge receipt only.
Moved by Gearbutt to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. We have Mr. Brian Rubel here from Tetra Tech, as well as our wastewater treatment superintendent, Mr. Bob Skull. Gentlemen, would you like to come to the podium and make a comment this evening?
No, okay.
I can do it.
Well, actually, this is for change order number 2, and the cost is $17,515.20. This is for unseen work that happened during the process of renovating the wastewater plant. There were some deductions as well as some additions. Are there any questions on specifics?
Before I get to questions, Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any comment this evening?
I can comment as long or as short as you'd like me to.
How about short, and then we'll
Okay,
open it
we'll
up
do
to
it.
questions.
Would you like a short overview of where we are with the project?
I think that would be great.
The project essentially is completed as of the end of January. I'm very happy with the results of the project and the work that was completed, with one exception. And we continue to struggle a little with the filters, which is the final step in the treatment process. Filters that were installed are mechanical devices, very large machines that rotate. And the mechanical elements of that rotation have failed a few times on us. The manufacturer has indeed been good about repairing the equipment. And they were out there as recently as last week, and will continue this week to try to get them back up and running and reliable like they should. When they have operated, they've done exactly what we hope that they will do with treating the water, but the reliability of the machinery in there has been a little bit of a concern. So we have our eye on that. We're working very hard at getting the manufacturer to resolve that. But everything else is really quite good on the project. I'm very happy with how it turned out. So there are 2 items on the agenda. The first is a change order, as Mr. Skull indicated, just balancing out various parts of the work. A few things were done that were unforeseen, and likewise, a few things did not need to be done, and therefore the city is getting a credit. So the net impact is a increase of about $17,000. In addition to that, the change order also has a reflection of the completion date. This council previously passed one extension to the contractor. And they went past that. It did take through the fall for them to get done. So we did have a meeting with the contractor and went through all the items, the schedule, this change order, a few other items that they request payment on that we rejected, and we talked about that. And we also talked about the filter performance. And we came up with a plan, I think, to address all of those items. This change order does give them time. It basically will change the contract date to their completion date without any damages imposed on them for that. The contract does call out for damages, but I guess that's up to you if whether to impose those or not. Clearly, the contractor would desire that you not impose those. So that's the first item. The second item is then the payment. We were hoping it'd be the last payment, but given the struggles we've had with that filter, we're recommending that we withhold the line item left payment for that filter, which is $26,790. So pay the contractor everything but that line item. And we'll monitor that here in February into March till we get those working reliably, and then we'll hopefully be able to pay them that final amount. So that's what's in front of you today, to pay them all but that $26,790. And as far as the filter goes, we're going to monitor how that is repaired this week, and probably meet with the manufacturer of that filter in early March, monitor how that's working, and hopefully get some assurance that that's the last and final repair needed. So that's it in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. What questions do we have for our guest, Mr. Rubel from Tetra Tech, or our wastewater superintendent, Mr. Skull? Mr. Gearbaugh.
What would be the dollar amount of liquidated damages?
It would be substantial. It's about $190,000 according to the letter of the contract.
My concern is, and this has been consistent, we've had projects like this where something wasn't caught and wasn't fixed before we signed off and paid off all our bills. And I'm referring to the 2 roofs that we had a disaster with, and we're now experiencing multi-million-dollar problems. Why should we pay this at this point in time if we don't know those filters are going to work? Are those filters only, can they be replaced for $26,000? Or are we talking about a complete redo or something having to be substituted if it fails?
Yeah, a different filter would be a substantial amount of money. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So that
You do have a warranty from the manufacturer. That is what we're relying upon.
And every example where we had a warranty, it ended up being the problem of the installer and the contractor. It was not the damage, it was not the product in itself, although this sounds more like it is partially the product.
I think this is a product issue, not a contractor issue.
And how long have we been working on this to get it resolved?
I'm sorry, this particular
How long have we
filter-
been working on trying to get these filters to work accurately?
It's been since late July.
Okay. Thank you. From my perspective, I've got a very hard press to pay any additional until this is fixed. I'm not going to go into the same example and the failure we had before. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. The other question I do, I'd like to know, is everything signed off, the warranties, everything? There's been a review. In the past, we had inspections and items and stuff that needed to have signed documentation, reviews, letters signed off.
We have gone through a rigorous process. We have every piece of paperwork needed to close the job, except for the working filters, so.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to make a comment, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, with respect to the filters, it's my understanding in conversations with Mr. Skull and Mr. Rubel this week that, or last week, actually, this week's still young, isn't it? That this is a problem with the manufacturer of the filter, and the manufacturer of the filter even agrees that that's the problem. It's not a problem with installation. It's unlike the roofs in that regard.
Yeah, well, we never thought the roofs were going to be failure either, so I'm being quite gun shy. I know, I agree.
I'm not telling you how to vote, I'm just giving you information.
Right.
Can we go back real quick before I open it up for additional questions? Can we go back to this issue that you briefly touched upon in your comments, Mr. Rubel, about a subcontractor who the duration of their project and work was more protracted than what was enumerated in the contract, and we have the ability to charge a penalty?
Well, it is actually the contractor.
Okay.
It is that contract between the city and the contractor. There are damages if they go late in their completion. It's spelled out, I think it's $1,200 a day for each of the completion dates, substantial and final completion. Again, that's something I think we'll have to make a decision on. I can tell you that the contractor's point of view is some suppliers did not perform in a timely manner, and that is the reason. We would have to, if the city were to do that, we would have to get into those details and spend quite a bit of time really understanding them and going through them.
How many days over are we?
They were, again, there's two dates, a substantial completion
Right.
and a final. The substantial was just over 60 days late. The final was, and I do have that, I think a little over 90 days.
So we're talking about a significant amount of money,
Yes, we are.
190,000.
That's the number I have.
Okay. I would say respectfully, and again, with the utmost respect to the contractor, having issues with suppliers, that's not our problem. You know, that's all I have to say on that for right now. There were some additional questions. I believe Ms. Tahar had some.
Yes, one question, back to the filters. Under the terms of the warranty, if the filters, worst case, can't be made to function, then what is the manufacturer responsible to do?
They are required to provide you a functional filter. So they're going to stay on it. I mean, filters do treat water when they operate. When these things rotate like they're supposed to, they are meeting the standard that we wish them to perform to. It's the reliability of the mechanical equipment inside that's been the issue. And I would argue that they're not treating water when they're not turning, and therefore they're not meeting the specification. So
Right,
they need to meet that specification.
okay.
Anything else right now, Ms. Tahar?
That's it.
Mr. Seo, did you have something, sir?
Well, I did, it's been partially answered, I guess. So the reason we're not pressing for damages is because the contractor is saying that it was outside of his control, that it was caused by his suppliers.
I'm relaying the argument that he gave to us.
But that's the argument he's making for
That's correct.
us not to impose the damages. I see.
Did they have a
If I
mention?
could-
Please.
If I could, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we had our discussions, a couple of the big reasons that we were choosing to advocate that on their behalf to say not to charge a late fee, late penalties, is because the quality of the work has been very high. Again, take everything away except for the filters, and their workmanship, the quality of the work, everything has been done very good, and certainly you can ask Bob and Brian both, and they'll tell you the same thing. And that's been the difficulty. The other thing is that there's, part of the other discussion was they have some other change items that they had put forward, and the discussion was, okay, that the change order number 2 that you have before you currently, those things we believe are legitimate and should be paid from a staff's perspective. But the other items, we disagreed with and said, okay, if you take those off, I can't remember, Brian, the amount of those.
I don't remember exactly. It was $20,000 to $25,000, something like that.
Right, and so, we said if you remove those, then we certainly, because of the quality of work that they did, and as Brian said, we're very pleased with all that work.
Very much so.
Then we would go to bat for them. So that's hopefully to answer a little more of your question.
Thank you.
Questions from this side, on this side of the dais, Ms. McClellan, please?
Yeah, regarding the warranty, and I guess this might be a question for Scott, but is there any recourse that we can take preemptively on the warranty? I mean, if it's not going to work, and we know it may, I just don't want to get into a situation where we're coming up against the warranty and then the manufacturer is going to come up with X, Y, and Z excuses for why they don't need to pay out the warranty. So I don't know if you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, there are two issues. There's the warranty issue, but there's also an issue, as Mr. Rubel indicated, as to whether it meets specifications. If it doesn't work, it doesn't meet the specifications in the contract, and it doesn't meet the specifications they promised us it would meet when we selected that product and put it in the specs. So we're going to have some ongoing dialogue with the manufacturer. He's already had that dialogue. He's setting that up for the next couple of weeks once they complete this repair and we determine the reliability of the repair. We have not and will not with this contract payment, we still haven't accepted the filters.
But we're saying that the only amount that we would withhold is $26,000, but to replace them would be far
Right,
more
but-
than that, so.
But see, the difficulty is we specified the filters.
Okay.
So the contractor provided the filters that we specified in our specifications and plans for the facility. So he's just
What-
obtained and installed that product. It's not an installation issue as we understand it. That's why he's recommending that the contractor be paid. We're still holding the manufacturer of the filters responsible for having functioning filters.
If the manufacturer then comes back and says it was an installation issue later, do we have any,
Well, so far that hasn't been the case.
I mean, is there something that we can have in writing that says that now, so that if we come across it later?
Yeah, we can certainly work with the filter manufacturer and make sure that that's what they say. Brian, I don't know if you've had discussion about that in particular, but.
Yes, we've talked about both the vendor and the contractor, and the vendor does not dispute the fact that it's his equipment that's not working. He is not pointing the finger at any party other than his own company, so.
Or just so that they don't have memory issues later to say, oh, well, wait a minute,
Well, I bet I have 40 emails from
Okay.
him stating that he needs to fix his own
Okay.
equipment, so.
Let me make this observation and comment. And it's directed not only to you gentlemen, but also to Mr. Smith, our legal counsel. Understanding the concerns that have been articulated from the dais, many of which I concur with, what is the harm in delaying approval and payment to our next meeting at the beginning of March, subsequent to Mr. Skull gaining some additional insight on this issue through his conversation, specifically through his conversation with the manufacturer?
I don't know as though contractor won't be pleased, but
Well, that sort of leads me to my second point.
that in and of itself
Okay.
doesn't cause me great wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I guess my second observation or recommendation is, while I understand the perspective that's been shared by our city manager, and I have no doubt that the contractor has done outstanding work, at the same time, we did have a formal agreement where we enumerated in writing what our expectation was, and that expectation was not met. And I made this comment in a slightly different context a few weeks ago, but I have to say, while I'm at the helm here, I don't want the city to be a pushover. So I think there's a balance to be found between, yes, they did outstanding work, and we want to be as accommodating and as helpful as possible, but at the same time, we made it clear we wanted a job done at a certain date. So I'd be looking for some additional insight from staff on that particular point. Additional comments, Mr. Gearbaugh.
Is there another manufacturer that produces filters, or is this a proprietary type?
Yes and no. There are 4 or 5 similar types of filters. All of them come in different shapes and dimensions and capacities. So there are replacements, all of which require a substantial amount of piping work and retrofitting and so forth. So there are options out there. It's not, if we have to make a change, there are options, but it's not something you do in an afternoon.
So at this point, we're stuck with what we've got from your perspective until, otherwise it's going to cost us additional time and money and efforts.
It would take months to get new equipment out there. So it's to everybody's interest, I think, that these repairs do the job. But
Was this new technology, or was it?
it's old technology. Well, not old. It's been in place. I know of some similar installations that are about 10 years old, 10, 12 years old. So it's not brand new. I can't explain totally why this manufacturer had the problem. I think he's got some similar equipment in the state that's working very well. This is one of his larger units, and therefore he may have undersized some pieces of some components of that equipment that have failed. That is what we're hoping. That is what they are replacing right now, beefing up some of the mechanical pieces.
So it's more than just the filter, the disc, it's the whole.
It's a series of discs. There's 6 or 8 of these discs, big discs, steel, made out of steel that rotate.
Yeah, because I've seen them.
Yeah.
But you're saying that they're having to beef up some of the equipment that's associated with those?
They are changing out the steel on these discs to make them heavier and sturdier to withstand the motions. So.
And of course, we're undergoing this whole odor abatement study, and I've got my druthers that somehow some of this change in this construction may have affected that issue. At this point, I'm not confident that some of our remod didn't contribute to this new concern that we have at this point. So this whole thing of settling this and not doing damages and everything else, there's so many unknowns at this point right now that I don't feel confident that, in all these questions that I've asked, I don't know what else to ask at this point that would make me feel confident to go forward with this.
Ms. Mitchell, did you have a comment?
I did. I have a question. So this warranty, is the clock ticking from back there, or is the clock ticking once we sign off?
Yes.
I think we can get that changed. They did update it from their last repair, so we will ask them to date it again at their next repair. When they get that running, we'll ask them to date it at that date.
And the warranty, is it for parts only? Is it for parts and labor? What is our liability?
The contract requires 2-year parts and 1-year labor. The contractor has offered, at this point, they have offered 3-year parts and labor.
And labor, okay.
That's part of our discussion with them of being uncomfortable with their first several months is you need to make us more certain, and that is one of the offers that they have given the city.
So if I want to make sure I understand you rightly, originally the warranty was 2 years parts and 1 year for labor.
That's correct.
And they have made some concessions, and they have said now it's 3 years for parts and labor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you have an approximate monetary value on labor?
It would depend on if there are damages made to, if there are repairs. I'm hoping there's going to be 0 repairs once they get it running. So, but I would think a warranty like that would cost tens of thousands of dollars a year if you were to purchase it.
So I guess I'm uncomfortable with the deadline as well. I would echo Mayor Marl's remarks that 1 week late, 2 weeks late, but 60 days and 90 days just makes me very, very uncomfortable. And especially considering the additional time and trouble that we're having to face, and in the context of our other capital improvements that are being made, it's very difficult to just sign off on no damages.
Let me make a suggestion. Let's accept the report. Let's not go ahead and approve the final payment and approve the change order. Let us do some more homework and return it to you at your next meeting with a more robust detailing our thinking, and hopefully by that time, we'll have more information about how the filters are working as well.
Good, that would be my recommendation. Actually, after I call for a vote on the motion that's been moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt, I'd be looking for a motion to table subsequent action to approve change order 2 and the payment of number 13 to our next meeting on March the 6th, which I believe would give legal counsel and staff sufficient time to clear up some of these issues. Is that correct? Is that fair? Okay, excellent. Any additional comments, please?
I do. I have a question. So what is the expectation for a grace period that they're expecting from us? I mean, what is their time frame? What's in the pipeline right now of when these new parts can be here? How long will it take to test them and approve that they're going to work? And for any period of time? I mean, how long are we supposed to just stand here waiting?
Yeah, I fully expect that the repairs will be this week, and internally, we talked about meeting with the vendor in early March to see how this is working. So that's the internal plan that we have.
And how quickly do they fail?
Well, we're developing a game plan for how to deal with the filter issue that's really separate from the contractor issue, because the contractor's not responsible for the failure of the filters. But we will have more information in a couple of weeks on the filters, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything further, Ms. Dillon?
No, that'll be fine. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor unless there's subsequent comments, or additional comments, rather. Mr. Gilbo, you have something else?
You had mentioned about the damages and all that. I mean, I was fine with extending it for 60 days. Then we extended it for another 90 days, and we still don't have it done. It may not be that we need the whole $190,000, but I honestly think the time that's had to been spent by our staff, our attorney, everything else, has costs associated with it, and I'm tired of having to foot the bill for all of this. So I know you made some adjustments, but at this point, there's something there that I think we need to make sure that the city's not going to walk away and just say, well, that's fine, you can keep pulling us as long as you can. So,
And obviously, that sentiment mirrors mine, and I think it mirrors Councilwoman Mitchell's. Ms. McClellan, would you be interested in pursuing something on this
Yes.
front? Okay. Ms. Tahar?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Seo?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's unanimous, so that gives you some direction. You can also report back on that then on the 6th, assuming that this item is postponed until then. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt of the February 10th, 2017 memo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion to postpone to March the 7th consideration of change order number 2 and the payment of the contractor's application for payment number 13 in the amount of $229,182.39.
So moved?
Moved by
Mitchell.
Councilwoman Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second. It's
Second.
March 6th,
March 6th, yes. What did I say?
7th.
7th, my apologies. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by McClellan to postpone to March 6th. Any discussion? Mr. Seo.
Yes, sir. I thought we just discussed perhaps imposing some kind of a penalty.
That's correct.
Way against that final amount, wouldn't it?
It would, but we're not actually, I mean, yes, but,
we're just postponing the motion.
yeah, we're just postponing it.
Okay, all right. I just don't want to be
That motion
stuck
and
with
that
that final
number,
amount of money.
that motion and the number that's enumerated within the motion are subject to change.
Very good.
Okay? It's been properly moved by Mitchell, seconded by McClellan to acknowledge receipt, or excuse me, to postpone to March the 6th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda, commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Mr. Gearbaum?
I'm not sure who takes ownership of this one, but we had, with the Planning Commission, had a joint session with City Council and with Parks and probably the Environmental Commission to discuss Salt Springs, and I think that came across very well. I think the individuals felt that there's a lot of benefit to our new park, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with some more of their ideas.
Very good, thank you. Additional committee, commissioner, and task force reports. Ms. Tahar?
Thank you. On behalf of the Environmental Commission, I just remind you that e-waste recycling will take place at City Hall on April 25th. I'll be making this announcement again.
Very good, thank you. Any other commission, committee, or task force reports? How about reports or other announcements? Mr. Seal.
The Saline Lindenberg Friendship Committee continues to move forward with plans for a visit this fall to Lindenberg. As of today, it's my belief that we now have 31 people who are going to depart Saline and visit Lindenberg. And we look forward very much to that trip and the further plans that the Germans are making on our behalf to visit not only Lindenberg, but Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Innsbruck, Austria.
Remind me, Mr. or Councilmember Seal, for those who may be interested, is the deadline eclipsed to apply to attend isn't the right word, to travel with our group to Lindenberg?
If anybody is still interested, their name would be placed on a waiting list.
Okay.
They would be pending somebody else withdrawing.
Cancellation. Okay, but you are accepting people on a wait list?
Correct.
Very good. All right, excellent. Thank you very much. Additional reports or announcements? Ms. Tahar?
Yes, I'll just mention, earlier this evening, I attended a coffee hour with State Senator Warren and Representative Lazinski at Saline District Library. There were more than 100 people in attendance, and they said the crowds have been growing at their coffee hours, and they expressed, and I believe them, that they are very, very interested in hearing our opinions about the issues that they're dealing with right now. So if you have an opinion, please share it with your state representative or senator, or both.
Very good. Other announcements? Mr. Gearbaum?
I just wanted to thank the city for installing the new furnace at the depot. I think that's helped for the heat, and after the raccoons had destroyed all the ductwork and everything underneath the floor, it's good to have it back up and running and keeping everybody able to use the facility.
Thank you. If there are no additional reports or announcements, we will proceed to the wastewater treatment plant update. Mr. Scull?
Yes, I was unable to attend the last meeting, so I'm not sure what was covered as far as the odor updates. Or do we go back? Okay. Well, at the end of November, Webster was out and they collected their samples and they ran some gas detection on various, like 8 different areas of the plant. I spoke with Webster on February 3rd, and they're plugging all that information into a computer model so they can run the model to determine which direction or where the odor is coming from and how it affects the neighborhoods. Since the last council meeting, we had acid washed both of the scrubbers to increase the airflow over the media. The media is basically wiffle balls, and you're adding caustic soda over time. They have a tendency to cement together, so you acid wash it to open up the pore space between the balls and allow the chemicals in the air to mingle better. I did also have an outside vendor, USP Technology. They're a chemical vendor. They specialize in odor abatement work, especially with sugar beet, some big industrial problems. They collected some samples and they ran some tests as well as Webster did, but they couldn't come up with anything concrete, so they want to come back, which I appreciate. They didn't try selling us anything. They want some more data on that. We did have the field service technician from Dual, the smaller scrubber, the original scrubber, the one that was installed in '96 out, and he field checked it. He's writing up a report. I have not received that yet. Tetra Tech has reported that we've had 6 odor complaints since they started keeping track of them in mid-January. The last one being the end of January. We haven't had any recently. And I spoke with Jeff Ross from Webster today. He's requested additional information, which I sent him, and he hopes to have a preliminary report by the 24th.
Can you, real quick, Mr. Scull, thank you for your report and analysis. Individuals, homeowners, property owners who wish to speak to Webster, how do they go about getting in touch with that company? Or do they have to wait and Webster will proactively contact people in the adjacent neighborhoods?
I believe the Tetra Tech rep, Tetra Tech's the boots on the ground, yeah. They will contact Webster with any concerns.
Okay.
And if the homeowners want to speak directly to them, we can arrange that as well.
Okay. So they would just contact your office?
Yes.
Email you or call you at the plant? Okay, very good. Are there questions for Mr. Scull? Ms. Dillon?
And this may be for the city manager, has the city received any calls where people are not calling the Tetra Tech line?
Not that I'm aware of. it's not been made, I've not been made aware of that.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Ms. Mitchell?
For the record, for people who are here, what is the phone number that people are supposed to call?
You know, it's on the website. I don't know it off the top of my head.
When you say
I'm
it's
sorry.
on the website, it's on our website? Is that
I believe it's on the
correct?
city webpage.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Or
like
they can
the
call my
front-
office.
They can call you
Yep.
at
Either
3 in
way.
the morning. So,
No,
so
but-
it's on the city site and
Mhm.
certainly in your area?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Scull, thank you very much. We'll proceed then to developing consensus on the future of the building and engineering department. Similar to what I did, about a month ago. I'm going to work my way across the dais to determine the opinions and thoughts of my council colleagues. Actually, Mr. Seal, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but a month ago you had a pretty clear and consistent opinion, and perhaps it's changed, perhaps it has not. But before I get to you, I want to provide an opportunity for the city manager to make any last comments and address any questions that any of you may have. Of course, we've had nearly 2 months to consider this. I believe that's ample time to make a thoughtful, informed decision. But if you do have questions, we'll entertain them after the city manager makes some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say thanks to certainly the city staff that has spent significant time, as well as city council, in their review of this per my request, because as Mr. Har mentioned the last week at the work session, this certainly is, yes, this is an operational item. However, it's a little bit of a combination, just because to consider farming this out, as opposed to having it in-house like we've had for all these years, is certainly a significant change to policy. So obviously that's where the council comes in. Having said that, I mean, a lot of good questions have been asked and points made, and when I brought this question to council, wanting to see, you know, if there was interest in doing this, whether keeping it in-house or farming it out, because as we do with which we've done with most everything, I think every department that we've had an opportunity to look at and evaluate and consider changes, we've done that. So hopefully, as they say, timing's everything. So at the appropriate time, while with Mr. Taylor retiring, that provided a good time to take an in-depth look at this department. In some cases, we've made significant changes to those departments after we've done the evaluation, and some we've remained status quo. I guess some of the things that I look at certainly is, you know, level of service, quality of service. I think, you know, as we've learned through the work sessions, you know, a lot of these folks, you know, they back each other up. So whether it's York Township or Pittsfield or the county, you know, the city currently utilizes, even before Mr. Taylor retired, we still utilize, for instance, the county for electric permits and inspections. We utilize Pittsfield for our plumbing. They're also a backup for mechanical, and so we utilize a number of these folks. So we know that they provide good inspections. But as far as the quick response, I mean, that's a question in my mind, and that little bit of disconnect, some would be greater than others, I think, depending on which option we were to go with. And the other, too, is when you have the full-time people, they also take on other job duties, and we've talked about that the last couple work sessions fairly extensively, as far as is concerned. And I think that's another concern. Another concern is the increase in cost, right, to our residents for permits. Now, we certainly can. I mean, we are currently on the very low end of what we charge for permits, what we pay our inspectors. That may need to go up a little bit, but currently we charge $50 for the inspection, $35 goes to the inspector, and the city retains $15. With the two, well, at least what I heard, and in my mind too, I would agree, the two in addition to maintaining it in-house, the two front runners, the county or Carlisle Wortman, they both would charge, I believe it's $65. And again, none of that is retained by the city. Those are concerns. But again, I think that the biggest one is by reducing a full-time staff member and seeing those additional job functions need to go someplace else on already, in most capacities, overflowing plates, as they say. I guess my recommendation is that because there is no cost savings really in any of these. I mean, the only one that's a little bit of cost savings is Pittsfield, and it's much lesser of a service provider. And so we still have a lot of things to do on this end. But having said that, I would recommend keeping it in-house, at least going forward, for the foreseeable future, because of the quality that we have. The other thing too that I didn't mention is the economic development portion. You know, we're able to provide a solid turnkey service for our community, for developments. You know, when we meet, when Business Ambassador Bennett and myself, and sometimes the mayor accompanies us, or other staff members, oftentimes they have questions, and instead of us having to take a week or two to get back to them, we can, if not that day, then the next day we can respond to them, or have the building and engineering department respond to them. So that's kind of what I have to say. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No questions. Okay, very good. Mr. Campo, we appreciate your remarks. Mr. Seo, may I start with you, sir?
You certainly may.
And then I'll work my way. I'll move to Ms. Dillon, Ms. Tahar, Mr. Yerba, Ms. McClellan, Ms. Mitchell, and then I will go last. So, Mr. Seo, the floor is yours.
I've tried to listen very carefully to everything everybody's had to say on the subject and to weigh my opinions accordingly. But I'm still not convinced that we should deviate from the course we're presently taking. I think that, as the gentleman from Moran tonight attested, we've provided a quality product to the building community with our own building department. And my belief is that in order to continue to save the taxpayers as much money as we can by providing cost-efficient permitting, and by using the hybrid that we presently use with various inspectors from various places for various kinds of trades, we can effectively provide the building inspection services that we need to provide if we keep the process in-house. I have never yet seen, I won't say I've never yet seen, but I've rarely seen an outsourcing that goes to a bigger outfit that does a better job, that does it more efficiently, more effectively, and still provides excellent service. So I think we ought to stay where we are. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seo. Ms. Dillon.
Well, I don't have a definitive answer for you as of yet. I had sent Mr. Campbell a list of questions a few days ago, and I just, prior to this meeting, got some responses to them. So I know those have not been shared with other council members as of yet. And I don't know whether they had similar questions or concerns the way I did. I'm still, everybody likes the idea of it being an in-house product. And it's just a matter of, are we willing to pay the cost for that? And where are we going to end up with it? I haven't seen any projections, 1 to 5 years, as to what's the best for the city, budgetarily wise. So until I can really see where we're going to stand with that, I think, because I don't know, I mean, are we looking at a 1-year or 5-year commitment to change? I mean, I guess that was the other thing we really hadn't discussed.
Well, I'm trying to develop consensus as to what direction council wants to go in, and theoretically, the sky's the limit. So, I mean, there are a number of different options, a number of different ways to skin this cat. I was hoping to develop consensus and hoping to get a definitive answer and opinion from all 7 of us, noting, again, for the record, that we've had nearly 2 months to ask questions and gather information. So,
but we've been piecemealing that information together. It's not as though we received the information, we've had 2 months to digest it. We've gotten a piece of paper here, you know, that sort of thing. So it does seem like it has been kind of piecemealed together. So where I'm at now is that I am undecided.
Okay. Ms. Tahar?
Yes, thank you. This is a complicated, clearly complicated question, and I am at this point in favor of, I have come to the conclusion that at this point, somewhat like Mr.Cio, I am in favor of retaining local control, and I would like the city staff to use this current situation as an opportunity to look at the possibility of making some reorganization in the department, thinking about how the department functions. We have 1.5 open positions right now, the retired position and then the half-time code enforcement officers. I would like to see it would make sense to me to think about how to make the very best use of the already existing cooperative agreements we have with county and other cities and townships in order to possibly move some of the activities that have been handled in the building department outside, so as to free up time to do some of the other things that we might need, thinking of code enforcement again. I would say one other, I've talked about excellence of service in the past in reference to this, thinking about this issue. I think one of the things that should be a high priority is that there is a very clear path for any customer of the building department to building department services that's not dependent on limited office hours. That was one of the attractions of going with the county, was the 24/7 availability of online applications. Obviously, we're not going to have 24/7 office hours, but that just as an example of the kinds of things that might be thought about in thinking about rethinking and reorganizing, using this situation as an opportunity to reorganize the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tahar. Okay, so I'm just trying to take some notes here. So your position, there's some nuance to it, of course, which is a good thing, but it mirrors that of Councilmember Seal.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Gearbaugh?
I guess my biggest concern and why I was coming after this for a redesign was the fact that we are subsidizing that department significantly. If we were to keep it the same way it is, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't end up increasing our fees to be similar to that of the county, because I don't think we've adequately covered the cost of oversight and so forth in those type of activities. So that was one of the reasons why I'm looking back and forth, is that we need to fix that gap. There's a problem in there that hasn't been resolved in the last 10 years. I think I was supportive of the mayor's proposal for Carlisle Wortman, and I'm still not clear on how that all plays out, with my understanding that potentially that would have led to maybe some, not maybe cost savings, but a way of a different management approach and how we would handle everything. From my perspective, the reason why I still encourage the fact that we would go to the county would be that they currently do our soil erosion and, as you said, electrical. To have them do the rest of it would seem appropriate. They have the people and the staffing there that would automatically be able to cover everything. Then what we end up having is the issue of our coordination here with developers and planners and so forth, how to play that out. So when I look at this, and as Councilwoman Dillon had mentioned, we kept getting more pieces of the pie, and in fact, in the last one, understanding what the current city superintendent / engineer are doing, I don't feel comfortable, and I've had these concerns before, of how the management of that department has played out. And as we know, we've recently had some major reminders of what happens if management isn't paying attention and got everything on skill with potential costs that are hitting us. I don't have a problem maintaining what we have right now, but I don't know what the costs are. I would like to still see a hybrid model of the county taking over our permitting and everything. They've already got stuff in place. We don't need to have to increment, we don't need to put in our software, which we don't currently have. The county can take that over. That'll work with our assessor. There's a lot of pieces that just make sense to have the county do a portion of it. And we still may have to hire a building inspector of some sort, but it's more of a, I don't know. And then we also have the code enforcement. So if we end up having one position versus having a position and a half, we may be able to merge that and allow the inspections and stuff to be taken place by the county. So I still think there's a lot of pieces that we just don't have a good understanding, and I think it needs to be looked at the entire department, just not the building services.
Ms. McClellan, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a complicated, maybe too complicated for getting into operations. But I agree with Ms. Terhar. I don't have an issue keeping it in-house, but I do think it's a great opportunity to kind of do some reorganization, some kind of hybrid approach. I do like what the county is doing and what the county offers as far as availability, website, that kind of thing. And I do think that, you know, providing outstanding customer service is our number one goal, to have that. I do appreciate Rand, the input from Rand tonight, because I do think that part of having someone in-house is, you know, having someone to access and manage things, that kind of thing. But I do think there's opportunities to improve the system as it is right now, so.
Very good, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Mitchell?
I was hoping to get the information that Janet had requested, but I'm also struck by several things. I think that there's an extreme lack of succession planning, and that this is exactly the kind of situation that we find ourselves in, and having to make a decision when we don't necessarily have what we'd like. But the succession planning in departments is so important, and it's troublesome to me that I think the number bandied about was that we have an assistant clerk that's spending 60% of her time in the building department, and that concerns me on a number of levels. At this point, I want to go in-house, but I am frustrated. I'm frustrated with the data. I'm frustrated making a decision under these circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments before I share some remarks? Well, first let me say, and I know I have mentioned this in the past, I want to thank Pittsfield Charter Township, York Charter Township, Washtenaw County Building Department, and Carlisle Wortman for submitting proposals and attending multiple meetings and having probably a plethora of conversations and interactions with staff. I also want to acknowledge, and I do appreciate the comments from the gentleman from Rand. It's true, and this needs to be re-articulated from time to time, but as it relates to our building and engineering department, we have been very blessed historically. Competent employees, people who have served with great distinction, individuals of outstanding integrity who have done the utmost to serve our citizens and our business people alike, and they've done that very well, and I want to congratulate them for their service and for their efforts. It also goes without saying that successful organizations take time, as Mr. Campbell said earlier, to evaluate and to scrutinize the services and programs that they provide to the people we represent to see if there's room for improved efficiencies and cost savings. And we've done this on a number of occasions with police dispatch, with Saline Parks and Rec, and I hope that it will continue to be our standard moving forward. Before I get into my position, I am a bit concerned, and I would be interested in working with my colleagues to understand how the process could have been better. Because I have to tell you, I thought that 2 months was more than sufficient to make an informed decision. To me, it's not really relevant whether the information came in one big lump sum or piecemeal, as long as you get the information, as long as you have sufficient time to evaluate it. And I'm also keenly aware that in leadership positions, there are times when we are called upon to make decisions under very difficult circumstances that may be unpopular. With that having been said, my position has always been something of an outlier. I have always favored from day one engaging further with Carlisle Wortman. It's true that for more than 2 decades they have provided us outstanding planning services, and I think it's a company that does a remarkable job remarkable job serving a number of municipalities in southeast Michigan. So what I would have favored was to try and lump all of those services into one contract, building, inspecting, code enforcement, planning, with some sort of 6-month to a year evaluation and review. And at that point, I think there may have been the potential for them to assume greater responsibility here within the city. I do know that my position mirrors many of my colleagues when I say this, however. To me, the cost was important, but it wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing is effectively serving and meeting the needs of the people that we represent. So I'm not going to shed any tears or lose any sleep over keeping it in-house. That appears to be the direction and the consensus from City Council, although there appears to be, and I think this is unanimous, that there are, of course, additional opportunities to improve efficiencies and to produce some cost savings and manage our resources more effectively. So I believe you have consensus on how to move forward, and of course we'll have a future discussion about this and other issues in the not-too-distant future. Anything else on this issue, Mr. Gearbaum?
Mayor, I would just like a little more clarification on, I know, and I agree with you, the Carlisle-Wortman approach, from my perspective, when we looked at the price tag, it was significant. But did you feel that that was going to be solving the other aspects of some of the positions, some of the job duties that would not necessarily be completed by them? I mean, we've got this concern of what's happening in that whole department and how best to effectively do that. And if we went to Carlisle-Wortman, it looked like we were going to add $100,000 to our bottom line, and that kind of raised questions.
Let me clarify my position. I was I'm not going to say alarmed, but the cost of engaging Carlisle-Wortman was excessive. Not excessive, I take that word back. Engaging them came at a substantial cost. But as is true in life, you do pay for quality. I guess the approach that I favor was to have City Manager Campbell and other staff members engage again with Carlisle-Wortman. I was interested in trying to lump all of the services, so that would be code enforcement, building inspecting, and planning into one annual contract. Review that after a 6-month or year-long period. If they are doing an outstanding job, and I would hope based on their track record, their history, that's what they would do, I think there would be the potential for Carlisle-Wortman assuming greater responsibility specifically within that department.
Okay. So you're saying the first year would be more of a transitional type?
Correct.
And then end up getting cost savings would be through whatever else could happen through transition or so forth. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, if there's nothing further on that, consensus has been developed, and I appreciate that. We'll move on to our final discussion item, which is the non-discrimination work group. You should have all received a memo in your packet from my office dated February the 9th. As the memo indicates, I have convened a work group that will be chaired by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and she will be joined by council members Gearbaugh and Mitchell to consider the adoption of a non-discrimination ordinance, very similar to what a number of municipalities throughout the state have adopted. I think the most compelling line in my memo is probably the second one, which is, it goes without saying that successful communities foster an environment where all of our citizens feel welcome and protected. So in that vein, I have charged them with connecting with regional and statewide organizations, local citizens, and legal counsel to gain additional insight and to make a formal recommendation to City Council no later than our first meeting in June, which would be June the 5th, 2017. Of course, the memo also indicates they're free to meet as frequently as they like and to use legal counsel as often as they deem appropriate. But again, I'm looking for some sort of consensus and recommendation to all of us on council by our first meeting in June the 5th. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have. It's pretty cut and dry and long overdue.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I can report, thank you. I can report we've already begun to work. Thank you to Mr. Hensel for comments this evening, and any one of the three of us would welcome hearing from any member of the public who would like to weigh in. Thank you.
Mr. Seal.
I absolutely concur that this is probably long overdue. My only concern is this, that it be written broadly enough to encompass all the small points that seem to continually crop up. That all of a sudden an ordinance, and I recognize we need to be evolutionary in how we look at things, but it seems like we write an ordinance and then it's criticized by people for not having this or for having too much of that, that it be broad enough Mr. Smith, please, that it encompasses all the people of all stripes and all preferences and all inputs, so that we're not going back at this thing year after year after year after year, that it's written and crafted well enough that it accomplishes the goals that it's set out to accomplish without being picked to death.
I think, I would suspect, Mr. Steele, that we're all on the same page and we share that sentiment. And I would note, because I believe Mr. Gearbaugh, Councilmember Gearbaugh, and myself, we emailed out a number of policies that will be reviewed, one of which is the Macomb County policy, which, Mr. Smith, you worked on directly, did you not? Which is a pretty thorough policy. I think it's pretty airtight. Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to be a good fit for Saline, but it's certainly something to model and to review. And I think this can be done in a way where we're not having to revise or to scrutinize the ordinance year after year on an annual or consistent basis. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, and I think even if you see examples of the city of Jackson just passed theirs, I mean, it wasn't unanimous, but at least they were approaching it. So there's enough examples out there, and knowing the city of Jackson, it was broad enough to encompass whatever. I think the one part of it that we look at is that we are looking at an ordinance, not necessarily a policy. I think a lot of, like Macomb is a policy for the county. I think this ordinance will be more encompassing, and probably we're going to look at our civil rights ordinance because it really only affects dealing with housing, where this would be more of a human rights approach, and so it needs to be updated. The last time that was updated was probably in the late 60s or early 70s.
Right, and like I say, recognize that these things are evolutionary, that there are new concerns that come to the fore on occasion. I just want it to be done very thoughtfully.
Yeah, and I don't think our idea is to make it a penalty type thing that's so unique and hard to even enforce. It's more of a thing that allows people to have a voice, which many people don't have that, and so that'll be our approach to making sure that there's an outlet for anyone in our city to feel that they can be heard.
Thank you.
So members of the public have thoughts, questions, concerns, suggestions, you're welcome to contact Mayor Pro Tem Tahar or Council Members Gearbaugh or Mitchell, and again, we'll look forward to a formal recommendation no later than June the 5th. If there are no additional discussion items this evening, we'll move on to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
John Olson, Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to take the opportunity to give one last chance. We've got coming Friday at 5 o'clock, we'll be closing nominations for Saline Salutes. That's where we honor our citizens, our veterans, and our first responders. So you can get nomination forms at the Senior Center here at City Hall. I took some out to the Rec Center or at the Chamber and in the library. So if you get those in, we sure would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, John. It's a great event. Look forward to seeing who the winners are.
Just real briefly, since we're back on the ordinance again, when I had spoken with Ms. Mitchell, I guess 2 weeks ago, I had expressed concerns, and Mr. Gearbaugh, as you said, it's about giving a voice. Big part of my concern was about where that voice was going, where enforcement would fall. I know in smaller communities, and obviously that most of this meeting has been back and forth about money, and any commission or committee requires money, even if it's just a recording clerk. My concern was what appeared to be the smaller community or municipalities' answer was to be the city manager as the default. And of course, no problem with Mr. Campbell per se, but I'm wondering whether there could be, previously we had a commission for this, whether a committee might be possible. I assume that that would be a closed meeting with Mr. Smith and Mr. Campbell when those concerns are brought forward. Barring the expenditures for a committee or commission, I'm wondering about what oversight might be. How we can all know that when people are coming forward with that it is being handled in a way that not just one or a handful of people might like, but the community at large would be more in tune with, and how we would get that information. I'm wondering if there's an answer to that question, or if that's going to be part of the discussion, or if, I'll be happy to touch base with the 3 council people in the future, trust me. But I just want to make sure that I think that idea of enforcement and whose desk this drops on is a big part of the discussion.
Thank you. And please keep in mind that at this point, everything's on the table. Nothing is excluded, and I think absolutely better than you reaching out to them, I think that Mayor Pro Tem Tahar and Council Members Gearbaugh and Mitchell might want to reach out to you, because it sounds like you have a number of insights and thoughts which might be valuable during this process. So thank you. Are there additional citizen comments?
Hi, I'm Mitch Rode. I run a small company at the block called Quantum Signal. Some of you know me. I just wanted to express my support for the concept of a non-discrimination ordinance and for the organizing of the committee. I think as someone who runs a small engineering technology company, I know exactly how hard it is to recruit and retain talent. It's our number one challenge. And as a scientist and technologist for my whole life, I can also tell you that one thing that you do recognize is that that talent knows no boundaries, whether it be gender or race or background or nationality, that talented, smart people come from everywhere and of all stripes and colors. And thus, the notion that Saline would be a welcoming community for folks of all backgrounds is important to our company. It not only is important to that as far as this makes good business sense for us in terms of our recruiting, but it makes sense to me personally. And so I just figured that I would stand up and give my wholehearted support for that, and I'll be following this very closely and hope that this leads to a positive ordinance that helps express the notion that Saline is in support of folks of diverse backgrounds. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate your comments. Any additional citizen comments? Please.
Again, Alan Scott, Rank Construction. Same topic. Whether or not it's Gary Rubel or someone else you hire, as I appreciate he's likely approaching retirement age or whatever, if he chooses to. I've been with Rand for 20 years, and not one time have I walked into appreciating, if anyone from Carlisle Wortman's here again, an office like that, and had a one-on-one meeting to discuss a project and details and how it fits your community and how it fits your taxpayers and all these businesses that we've been fortunate enough to build for in this community. They do pay the taxes that let all this happen. And so smoothing that process, I tell you what, if you're really informed, and Mr. Fordyce sitting here can tell you, working with Washtenaw County right now, especially in regard to soil erosion, is brutal, ridiculous, business killing opportunities. So working with someone like Gary and the department you folks have had has been outstanding. Just want to say it again. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you being here. Any additional comments? Is there any other business to be brought before Saline City Council this evening? Please note we will have a work meeting beginning at 6:30 on the 6th of March to discuss the capital improvement plan, and then a regular meeting at 7:30. Our following meeting will be on March the 20th. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss possible property acquisition pursuant to subsection 8D of the Open Meetings Act, and to discuss material exempt from disclosure by state statute pursuant to section HA of the Open Meetings Act, and to consider strategy connected with a negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement pursuant to subsections 8C of the Open Meetings Act.
So moved.
Moved to convene by Gearbaugh, seconded by Tahar. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Seal?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
Councilmember Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Tahar?
Yes.
Mayor Morrow?
Yes, we are convened into closed session then at, let's say, 8:48 p.m.